My favorite.
It's Judd's Hockey Show.
Yes, indeed, it is Judd's Hockey Show, because you know what? We never rest. That means Judd. That means Declan. That means our good friend Jesse Pierce, who also, of course, you can hear on the Bar Down Beauties podcast, as well as find her work on NHL.com covering the Wild. In fact, she's very excited because the developmental camp is this week. So you get to go out there and talk to all of the young prospects. This team is filled with prospects. Jesse, who is your first story going to be on from the developmental camp at TRIA this weekend?
Charlie Stramel. Got to go with this year's first rounder. Then we're also going to check in with Liam Ogren, last year's first rounder. And I don't know, I have to look at the list that my lovely editors at NHL.com gave me. I know they're excited to share the prospects. I'm excited. It'll be nice to get back to a rink, nice to get back to work, give the son a little bit of a break, perhaps.
How do you ask Charlie, hey, dude, congratulations, first round pick. It's awesome. No one's really excited about you. How do you ask that? I feel bad for him, too. Like,
yeah,
he's a kid. He's got, who knows, right? But it's like,
he's a Minnesota kid. He's so excited getting drafted by his hometown team, and people just hated it. I think it's a valid question, though, right? Like, how did you handle that? How do you navigate that? Because that's not how you want to feel.
Well, and he's from here,
the NHL,
so he got it. Like it's not like he's isolated away from here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is his poor kid's hometown. All right, plenty to get into with free agency having opened on July 1st. The draft, of course, we have discussed already. But before we do that, I don't want to talk about ice. I want to talk about water. I want to talk about the beautiful lakes in which it is time to get, if you're a sports fan, your throttle therapy on land, and of course, water. And it all starts at the Lodge. I am talking, ladies and gentlemen, about the Power Lodge. Cruise in luxury on a brand new Bennington pontoon from Power Lodge. Look at that. Enjoy the sunset from the water, entertain the kids, float on the lakes all summer long, and it all starts at the Lodge, the Twin Cities' newest Bennington dealer, the Power Lodge. Locations in Brainerd, Onamia, Ramsey, and of course, Miller Marine of St. Cloud. Hundreds of pontoons in stock across all Power Lodge locations. Your summer begins at Brainerd's newest Bennington dealer, the Power Lodge. Visit powerlodge.com and millermarine.com and make sure that you enjoy our brief but glorious summers in this state. Before we get back to it freezes over, it becomes ice. And yes, before we know it, hockey season will be here. All right. I'm going to get into a variety of topics with both of you today. And we are going to start with this one. Jesse, you go first. What are your feelings on the Wild? And this is not a surprise, but we knew going into the free agency period, they weren't going to be able to make a lot of moves because they were cash strapped. And the next 2 years, or at least this coming year with cap going up, I believe, again, $1 million was going to be incredibly tight. Beyond it, the trade for Pat Maroon and a few free agent signings of guys to two-way contracts, Bill Guerin was basically hamstrung here. What are your thoughts on that? Does that concern you or not?
No, because going into the season, you knew they were broke. I'm broke, but the Wild are broke in their own terms. I'd still take some of their salary.
Amen, sister. So am I.
Yes,
I know the feeling.
But no, I mean, I think everybody, it's so funny because you're seeing people criticize them. Why hasn't Billy Guerin done something? Why hasn't he made things? I think, what did you expect him to be doing? I mean, yes, we have mentioned a couple names that could be traded out, right? Maybe you do look at making some moves, but ultimately, this is the safe route. And Bill Guerin, you're right, doesn't usually play it safe, but right now he is. I mean, the fact that he had mentioned on the opening day of free agency, July 1, to us media members saying, hey, we've got about $800,000 to spend, and then goes out and gets Pat Maroon for $800,000 thanks to Tampa retaining it. I mean, Bill Guerin's approaching it very methodically, very straight down the gut, because he kind of has to do that. Last year's team was fine, and I know we hate saying that word. We hate watching a team that's fine. I think right now he's trying to get by at just fine. I mean, I think those additions, Vinny Lettieri, you had mentioned he's on a two-way. Another Minnesota kid, which kind of hate, but here we are. And then obviously Pat Maroon, as we've discussed, the
thought of you when Vinny signed. My first thought was, oh, Pierce is not going to like this.
Oh, I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, we don't need to do this. But Vinny Lettieri does have upside. And again, it being a two-way contract, that helps out. So yeah, what Bill Guerin has done thus far, it's still very early, seems about right. It seems safe. It seems fine, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, they were able to do what they were expected, which was pretty minimal. I like Pat Maroon. I think that's a guy who's won multiple Stanley Cups. He's great in the room. He basically replaces the Ryan Reeves role. And in my opinion, I think he's just a better player than Ryan Reeves is too. So I think what they're able to do, given their limited cap structure, that works great. Lettieri, kind of a Judd made the term quad A player that you see in baseball sometimes, guys that rake in AAA but don't really perform at the major league level. I covered Lettieri for 1500 ESPN during his last season with the Gophers in 2016-17, where he kind of blossomed and turned into a really good hockey player there. There could be something there. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything. I wouldn't have high hopes that they're sleeping on like a gold mine here that hasn't been woken up yet. But I think given what they had limited resources to do, considering they still have to get Gustavsson done, which I think we'll get into here, I think bringing in Pat Maroon is a pretty solid expectation and a pretty solid sign for them going forward.
Two thoughts here. One is I actually like the fact that they can't do much. It's not that Guerin has been foolish, but we certainly have seen GMs, Chuck Fletcher, make moves before that are probably too aggressive. July 1st, especially in this league, leads to a lot of bad contracts. Like it leads to a lot of bad decisions. This guy might look good. It almost becomes like a fantasy draft at times. Like, oh yeah, I can add that guy. I'll add that guy. And then in a couple of years, like, oh my God, what was I? And this one, case in point, potentially the Predators. This one had a lot of older guys that were tempting, but you don't know there. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly, I like, but I think he signed for 4 years. Really? Like that to me is way too much. So the word I've got written down is the Wild salary cap constraints provide a governor, and it's going to force them to basically give guys opportunities, which since the Athletic, what about a year ago now, rated them the best farm system in the National Hockey League, they need to do exactly that. So that forced governor I actually like. The Maroon one's interesting because I'm with you guys. I love this move as far as, one thing that Bill Guerin got right was he watched this team for a year and he's like, this locker room sucks. Like it is nobody who can take control. It's a lot of me first guys. And like Reeves was, I can't tell you because Jess, we weren't in there an absolute ton. You were more than me. But I think Ryan Reeves was a great teammate. And I think Pat Maroon the same way. And these are not veterans out for themselves. Now, the only thing that I will caution is this, and it's not Bill Guerin, it's Dean. Patty Maroon has to be used correctly. Like if he is used as a leader, if he is used on the fourth line, that's great. If Dino gets over his skis with him, though, like veteran guy, I'm going to play him more, that becomes a problem. But that's not a Bill Guerin problem. So just on the surface, as an early July move, I applaud both of these things so far because one, to me, it's indicating that you're going to give the kids a chance. And two, Pat Maroon is going to be a great sounding board for a lot of young guys that need that. And this is not a selfish type of guy.
Right. I think you nailed it, Judd. I mean, from what I got to learn of Ryan Reeves in the locker room, he is a fantastic teammate. Guys love him. He makes guys laugh. And he's a no BS kind of guy, which is exactly what Bill Guerin called Pat Maroon. I spoke with a couple of my friends who cover the Lightning in Tampa. They said, you're absolutely going to love him. You're going to love him. He's a quote machine because he will give you exactly what you want, no matter how it is. And I think having that presence as they start to get some of these younger guys more opportunities, hopefully, having somebody that can call it out and say, hey, this isn't good enough. You really don't have a lot of that on the Wild. You have certainly leadership and the sense of bringing the team together, but you don't have anybody yet that's really been willing to get people in line, it seems. I think Ryan Reeves did that a little bit. Matt Zuccarello once in a while does it. But I think Patrick Maroon's really going to be that guy. And you touched on it there. My one concern is, are the younger guys going to be able to find a way into this lineup? The way that I projected it, you got your top line of Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello. You got your second line of Johansson, Joel Eriksson, Matt Boldy. You got Foligno, Rossi, Gaudreau. And then you've got Maroon, Dewar, and Duhaime, depending on how Duhaime shakes out with his arbitration hearing, which means Adam Beckman, Sammy Walker, two guys that got quite a bit of looks last year, probably going to be sitting on the outside until injury. You're still going to be able to see them because if this is the forward group moving forward, you're going to have them as backups. But You might not expecting them to play as large of a role had Patrick Maroon not been signed.
Where is Marco Rossi in your depth chart, Jesse Pierce? And Declan, too.
Third line center.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to be second line. I would like to have, I would move Eck back and just have him be a checking line guy. I know it might look like you're making him the third line center, but I think it just suits him better. And I want Rossi to get a look with better playmakers.
I was going to say, you want Rossi with Boldy, like everybody.
Yes.
Am I a bad guy for saying
Yes.
as soon as I can? Thank you. I know, but am I a bad guy for saying that as soon as possible, I want Hartman off that top line?
I don't think you're a bad guy. I think I don't want him near the top line either. I think he's fine as a fourth line guy.
But opening night, he's going to be top line.
I know he is, and it pisses me off. But he should be in the fourth line. I'm with you. I don't think I'll be the bad guy with you.
Well, he can be a third line guy for all I care. He can be on the
That's
wing
fine.
for all I care.
You want Marco Rossi up on that top line? Is that your
Not
other
opening-
thought process?
Not opening night.
Not opening night, but to your point, Jess, if you can establish confidence there, then yes, I would. At some point in time, I would. Like, I don't need it to be October, whatever the date is of the opener. But if Marco Rossi starts to play well, and I think most importantly gets confidence, and probably most importantly gets confidence from his coach, I don't see any need for Hartman to be on that top line for long with the current incarnation of what they're doing. Do you?
But what if the formerly Grief line, formerly Geek line, the Foligno Rossi Gaudreau line, what if that turns into something special? You know Dean's not touching it. If they do if they have like 2 good games in a row, that's his line. We're keeping it. We're going to find a new nickname for him, get the t-shirts made.
I'm with Declan on this, though. Like, this is a year of experimentation. This is your freshman year in college hockey-wise, okay? I need Dino to experiment here. Like, these 2 years give you an opportunity to play your youth. Like, this has to be done right. If Patty Maroon all of a sudden ends up on playing a bunch, that something's gone wrong as far as I'm concerned.
So don't go into a college with committed relationship like I did for 4 years. You're saying don't break up with Ryan Hartman and go test out other things. Is that what you're trying to say here?
The same thing. So
Yeah.
I'm not a guy
Find
to talk,
yourself.
but I'm just saying, yes, exactly right. And Dean needs to find himself as far as who's going to play where. So, all right. The second question, Dex touched on it briefly. So Filip Gustavsson's a restricted free agent. He and, as Jesse said, Brandon Duhaime have filed for arbitration. Now, of all the cases that were filed for arbitration last summer, only one in the entire league went to it. So odds are a contract gets done. But let me pose this question to both of you. And we'll start with you again, Jesse. Filip Gustavsson, it looks like from the reports, his camp has been saying, our guy played great. We deserve more. Now, he's sort of in a pickle here. He can't really dictate the terms. But is there any way, if this went too far, sort of like Cam Talbot in a different way last year, would you consider trying to move him, bring up Wallstead, and have Wallstead be Fleury's backup opening night here? Like, are you still... I feel like we spent last year being paranoid about Jesper. And okay, cool. But if Gustavsson really wants to try and break the bank and this is going to become a problem, more so with his reps and Bill Guerin, would you consider at least testing the waters to try and move him and just expedite Wallstead to Minnesota?
I thought about this one a lot. It kept me up at night, actually. In fact, it's still bothering me because my concern is, what are you really going to get for him? I'm always all for testing the waters on anybody. I've said that time and time again. I am not afraid to make a trade if it makes sense for the Minnesota Wild, if it betters them immediately. The thing is, Gustavsson, yes, he had a phenomenal year last year. Can he continue to do that? We just don't know, right? Like, you just have no idea. So as Bill Guerin goes out to potentially shop him, people are going to say the same thing. Like, are you crazy, Billy? Like, no, what do you mean? He had a great opening year. I mean, Jeremy Swayman is also going to arbitration too, which doesn't exactly probably help Billy. Obviously, Jeremy Swayman, fantastic year with Linus Ullmark in Boston. But no, and I think Jesper's not going anywhere, you guys. Like, there's no need to get him up here. I think it would be smarter to ride with Gus, because I think Jesper, he started out rough. It was a tough start for him in the American Hockey League. Like, that would be a same struggle transition. Now, he's already doing better than another Swedish goaltender that I personally love, Henrik Lundqvist, in his early on career. But I would say, no, keep Gus if you can, which you probably will be able to. Ultimately, to answer the question, Judd, it's the Gus bus. Get on board some way or another, and we'll see Jesper next year. Maybe a game or two this year should it require it.
So I'm on the plan of just, if this guy wants to come back here on a nice bridge deal for $3 million and kind of, pun intended, bridge the gap between Jesper Wallstedt, I'm all for that. If he's playing hardball, if he is laying his cards on the table saying, nope, I'm not signing for anything less than this, you trade his ass. I mean, here's the thing. You can find there's backup goalies right now that are free agents. You can find an Antti Ratna, right? You can find all these type of guys that are just laying around there. Fredrik Anderson is another one too. Like, he might make a little bit more. But my point is, you can find backup. They found Filip Gustavsson trading Cam Talbot. None of us thought that you can do this. Never overpay for goaltending. That's been my creed on this show since Judd and I have started doing this for like 4 or 5 years. Never overpay for goaltending. Dubnyk had problems. Cam Talbot has had problems. Fleury's had problems. They have never overpaid for goaltending. It cap strucks you. It makes things very difficult to build out your roster. You can find your replacement in Filip Gustavsson if he does so. I'm on board in bringing him back, but if he's trying to play hardball and I'm Bill Guerin, I will help facilitate that trade. I would do it.
Freddie Anderson's laying around because he's old and can't
Yeah,
move.
but exactly.
I don't want any of those old men that you just named.
Just stand there.
Jeez, I'm an old man. Thanks a lot. Where's HR? Stella, get me HR on the phone. Okay, so this is intriguing because, fair or not, and look, a hot goaltender in the playoffs can still take you a long way. So I'm not trying to disparage it. But to Declan's point, in the National Hockey League 2023, the goaltending position has become a lot like the running back position in football, which is you don't pay too much. And so here's where I'm torn. In Vegas, Aiden Hill, who got a new contract there, by the way, was really, really damn good. Now, I think he was the fourth, and this backs up Dex's point. He was like the fourth or fifth goaltender they used this season because of injuries. They tried to play. They got quick in that weird trade that went Kings, Columbus, Vegas. But eventually, when I think it was Bressois got hurt, Hill took over, and really the key there was the same key that Binnington had when the Blues won the Cup, which is big-ass defensemen that can kick people's butts, that protect the goaltender. The goaltender has to be good. I'm not trying to say you can't be good, but I am saying that it's the size and the quality of your blue line in both of those cases that really helped to win the Cup as much or more so than the goaltender. I think Gustafsson's sort of stuck here. Like, I think he's going to have to take what he gets. He might not be pleased, but I will say this. And again, it's a governor caused by the salary cap that I actually like. I like the fact that they can't give Gustafsson anywhere close to what his reps want, because I don't trust it yet, you guys. Like, I need to see at least another year of like this goaltending. So I actually sort of like this. I am curious what the Wallstedt plan is. Like, are they going to give him another full year at Iowa and then he comes up? Because clearly, you know, after 2023-24, Fleury's gone, right? So if you got the Gus bus, then is he your number one and Wallstedt your two? Is Wallstedt your one? But I am with Declan in lockstep. He has convinced me, and I don't think he's wrong, that you don't pay a goaltender like he used to in the days of Ken Dryden when he was absolutely imperative. So I'm torn here because I appreciate the importance, but I want to see the Wild build up a big blue line and pay for that more than I do pay goaltenders, Jesse.
That's fair. No, I agree. Again, I can't imagine you get much for him. Like, what's the?
I think you might be right. Yeah,
like,
and I think
guess
he's stuck.
I want something nice. I want nice things. I just want nice.
Like, what do you want for him? Like, if you're going to take him to market, what do you want?
Give me a centerman and a defenseman.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting that. I think you're getting like a third round pick, and that's the problem.
Right. Exactly.
Like Declan's thinking, it feels to me like the way he thinks about goaltending is very modern day GMs as well. Mm-hmm. So I think, Declan, you're right.
Hire me, Billy. Hire me.
Billy, I love Billy. I love Billy.
Come on,
I
we'll
think
have a couple cocktails. We'll have a couple
Yep.
Manhattans. We'll talk
Get the
about.
red
We'll
phone.
figure this out. Come on.
Good bet phone.
Manhattan's, you'll be tanked. You can't make any deals.
We'll get some deals. Don't worry. I'll let Billy figure that part. I'll get my stuff out early, and then Billy can facilitate it. He can probably hang a lot better than.
Your
old
best
bastards.
ideas and deals come after a couple vodka sodis or something like that. Let's be
There you
honest.
go.
We all know this to be true.
Just drink some beer. Can't you guys just drink beer? Come on, why not? Manhattans are too much, man. Too much.
True.
All right, next one. Next question. And Dex, we'll start with you this time. And I understand he didn't have a great year, okay? Because I put this out on Twitter and I immediately got back. He's awful. He's blah blah, which I don't agree with. But Declan, are you surprised that with all the defensemen, and just for a reference point, Ian Cole, who's a nice, who played here, and he's a nice player.
He's not a nice guy.
I don't know if he's a nice guy.
Well, he's a nice player. He might not be a nice guy. I don't know. He's a hockey player. Okay. I don't know, but he is about my age and he already got a contract with the Canucks. Matt Dumba remains on the market. Now in the scoop session that we did on Minnesota Sports with Mackie and Judd today, Doogie tells us that Dumba actually has an offer from the Coyotes, but he's holding out hope for another offer from a team that's trying to clear cap space. Nonetheless, are you surprised that Matt Dumba remains on the open market?
A little surprised, I guess, just because I figured he'd get scooped up here pretty quick. I don't know if he's maybe, again, playing some hardball and wants a bigger contract. I think Arizona makes sense. Jess, I thought I remember hearing, too, he resides in Arizona, like during the offseason.
He's got a house in Arizona.
So he likes to be over there. So I always thought Arizona makes sense. I think Dallas also makes sense. I think just some of those teams that are looking for a solid, fringe top four defenseman who can still be a pretty good power play and specialist and whatnot. A little surprised, but I wouldn't say I'm shocked he's still available either. I'm just a little surprised he's still out there, but I expect him to probably sign here in the next week or so.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I thought when you looked at the board of UFA's established defensemen too, Matt Dumba was right up near the top. And to see players, I mean, Justin Hall, who Minnesota boy, right? Toronto hated him back on defense. He signs with somebody too, Ryan Graves. I mean, a lot of those names are gone and Dumba still is just kind of sitting around. So it's surprising, but I think, just like using him as trade bait, teams are probably nervous. You saw that injury. You saw how off he has been since he had surgery. The age he's at, and you look at what Dumba was making this last year. Was it $5-6 million? I don't know that teams want to spend that on him, rightfully so. I mean, you certainly have teams that are out there willy-nilly throwing cash at anybody that wants it. Chicago, namely Corey Perry, ridiculous. But I am. I'm surprised it's still going on. I expected probably before the 4th of July. I was like, okay, maybe not the first day. That's fine. But to be sitting here, what is it, July 6th, and Dumba's still on the board, be curious. But I agree. Arizona makes sense. I know he loves it down there. I don't think they do the taxes either correctly. I think that's why a lot of NHLers enjoy that. But I always kind of liked Calgary. He's a Calgary kid.
That's what I thought.
For him to go home, but
I thought the exact same thing. I guess the thing that surprised me a bit is how long did we all, and like this show, the team itself, how long did we struggle with, oh man, can you trade Dumba? And they would always say he's so great in the room and we can't trade him and blah, blah, blah. I now feel like it's fair to say we overinflated, and look, his play did decline and his slap shot, it's still there, but he's got no control. Like this was a guy before the Tkachuk fight. If you guys recall, he was off to that offensively just unbelievable start. And that slap shot was a boomer at the time. It's a boomer now, but it goes wide half the time. But I just think it's funny now that he's still available. How much we overinflated, I guess, potentially his stock. Because I mean, we always talked about like, can you trade, would you expose him in the expansion draft? Could you trade him? I can't trade him. And now it's like, again, a lot of guys have signed. Justin Hull, to Jesse's point, goes to Detroit,
Jack
Ian
Johnson's
Cole.
still sticking around in Colorado. Like
exactly.
I mean, but they're cheap.
Eric
too.
Johnson to Buffalo. Yeah. But I mean, I guess that's the point. As I'm sure some teams came to Matt and said, hey, take this. And he's like, oh, I'm worth way more. And it's like the Wild told you that, but I'm not sure that that's true.
Do you think it means that he's just going to end up being a thorn in Minnesota's side somehow? He's like, you know what? Sure, Bill. I'll take $1 million to stay here in Minnesota.
No,
Like,
well,
we trying to get rid of him for 5 years.
in retrospect, I'm not positive. I don't think it will happen, but I'm not so sure now.
Yeah, it
And
wouldn't
and
shock
I
me.
have
would be
no
something.
interest in him coming back.
No.
Like his play and the lapses at times. But that leads into the last question, which is this. Jesse, how much better is the Central Division post-draft? Because it starts with Bedard going to Chicago and free agency that we've gotten through so far, started on July 1st. How much better is the Central Division as a whole right now than it was at the end of the season?
So much better. I mean, I think you saw the past 2 seasons at least that I can think of off the top of my head. It's been you've got your top 3 teams and then the rest of them kind of suck, right? It kind of falls off. Now you've got people back in the competition. Chicago, obviously. St. Louis has been doing their due diligence to pump up. Nashville, as we discussed, is going to be another interesting case. Although I thought Nashville was going to be good last year with the moves they made, and they weren't. So who knows with them? But I think it will be. I mean, Minnesota, again, staying that trajectory of being fine is maybe not going to work out as well. So I mean, I tend to say it every year, but this year they will be a true bubble team if they head into this year with the team that they have set as it is now, just because it'll come back to the good old days when you're waiting until that last game because everybody else is muddled in the middle. So I think it'll be a far more competitive division without question, which could be a lot of fun. You could see some really fun games in St. Paul, but it could also be not so great for the Minnesota Wild as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's one of the toughest divisions in the NHL, and it's always been really, really tough. I see them mostly as a fringe playoff team, too. I see them as maybe a wild card team. They're still not bad enough, pending injuries to important players, to just be completely awful. But I think they do take that step back. I would be shocked if they got to 90 points, but usually that's kind of the number to be a wild card team. I think I don't know what their Vegas over-under is at the moment, but I would reckon it's somewhere in the high 80s, if that. So I would probably put them as a fringe playoff team, and it's going to be a dogfight like it usually always is in that division.
Jesse, back to your point. Did Barry Trotz improve the Preds or spend like a drunken sailor on basically guys who are going to be, for lack of a better term, his drinking buddies? I can't figure that one out.
I mean, he certainly is putting his mark. I like Barry Trotz, right?
I do too, but he's a coach. But as a coach.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I look at that list of players that he signed, starting with ROR, and I'm like, oh, wow. And then I'm like, but they're all approaching my age.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they better or are they just old?
They're just old. And I think that's it. I know the players, right? Like, I'm like, oh, yeah. I know him, forgetting it's because they're like my age and I've been watching them the entire time that they've come up. So, I mean, same with Pat Maroon. You look at Pat Maroon, it's a name, but he's old, right? Like he's going to be what he is. Although there is something to be said about getting a name and somebody with that, from Billy Guerin to bring in Pat Maroon and bring in Marc-Andre Fleury and guys that, Pat Maroon obviously didn't have a say in it, but it's interesting. And ROR could be good at Nashville. Nashville just doesn't know what to do. They're kind of just stuck, right? Like they don't know what to do. They had Nino, they had Granlund, they had some good players out there. They traded Ryan Johansson to Colorado to start things off. Like they're kind of lost.
I don't know that Barry Trotz as a GM knows what he's doing yet. Like that's the thing, because he got this cap space, and the only thing that I applaud is he has de-wildified his room, which I actually like. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it took some, hey, let's take Granlund and Niederreiter. It's like, you don't want to do that. So I like that the fact he's purged his room of those guys, but it just feels like the Preds, it feels like he is running a fantasy hockey team. And it's like, I know that guy. I'll sign that guy. And as we know, because of the cap, that can be really, really dumb. Again, July 1st, the one thing I'll agree with Chuck Fletcher on was it was the year that the Wild signed, God help him, Thomas Vanek. And at the press conference Fletcher did for that signing, he's like, these prices are ridiculous. He's like, this is he was pissed off, and he was right, because it's like these veteran guys who are names are getting paid. My last observation, curious to get your thoughts, is this. I do think Jason Zucker could be a potential thorn in the side because of who he is playing for the Coyotes now into the Wild side, because he's the type of guy, Jesse, He is the exact type of guy who will get up for games against this team. I'm not saying he's going to be good there. I'm saying I could see him being a pain in the ass for his former team.
You think so? Like, I think he still loves Minnesota. I hope Minnesotans are happy to hear that. He loves you. I'm sure he still just loves
I'm
you.
just saying scoring goals against you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that
Doesn't
was the
score.
thing. Watching Jason Zucker, again, I always laugh because he reminded me of Mendoza from Mighty Ducks because he was always crashing into the net when he had a breakaway, right? Like, he very rarely scored the puck. He just crashed because he couldn't stop.
timing.
I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
We just
But-
watched that film for our movie rewind that we're going to do on Friday.
Nice.
I just watched Mighty Ducks 2 is going to be our film, and I just watched it yesterday, and that guy could not stop for the love of God except for
Jason
that last
Zucker out there on a breakaway. I'm just saying, apples to apples, if you ask me.
Do
But
you remember when he took that kid out, the flag bearer kid?
yes, yeah.
He's Dax, he creamed the flag bearer.
Yeah, it's great.
It's just so ridiculous. But Pittsburgh loved him, and he did. He really upped his game. I didn't know that there was more of a ceiling for him until what you saw. Now, granted, in Pittsburgh, he was surrounded by a ton of talent, and the team still didn't make it to the playoffs this year for the first time in forever. But yeah, I could see him maybe getting extra up for it. But then again, I think he's played against Minnesota for how many seasons now, right? Like, he's been gone for a little bit that you'd have to imagine that's kind of worn off. I know the Minnesota Wild fan base still simply adores him. It seems everywhere I go, he's still a fan favorite, but it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see how he does in Arizona, because that's another team that's really trying to build something there. And Jason Zucker's on that veteran side of the bridge now. So it could be interesting. I'm excited to see him try to do a breakaway and not stop into Marc-Andre Fleury, something like that.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I think he'll be fine in Arizona. I don't think he's as good as he used to be. We'll see what Arizona does in general. I think they're just kind of a dumpster fire. So good luck to them, pretty much, is kind of how I would.
I hope they're not. They need to get to get a building. They need to get decent. So, all right, Jesse, thanks much. Declan, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, hit that subscribe button for Daily Minnesota Sports Entertainment. This is Judd's Hockey Show. We're still turning out content throughout the off season, so hit that subscribe button for content also on the Wild, the Wolves, the Twins, Doogie. Plenty of great stuff here on Minnesota Sports with Mackie and Judd. This has been Judd's Hockey Show.